I never expected a single afternoon to flip my entire life upside down. It started in the middle of a crowded mall when Alyssa held up an $8,000 designer bag and told me that if I didn't buy it, we were done. Her friends stood behind her, nodding like they were watching a scripted scene unfold. For a second, I thought she was joking, but the look in her eyes was sharp and calculated. I told her no, and she ended the relationship right there without a second of hesitation. I walked away thinking the worst part was over. But 2 hours later, a notification hit my phone showing that someone had used my emergency credit card at the exact same store. The name tied to the transaction was hers. That was the moment I realized the breakup wasn't the end. It was only the spark that would expose everything she had been hiding. Alyssa's demand for the expensive bag didn't come out of nowhere. She had been dropping hints for weeks, sending me photos and saying it was a milestone gift that any real boyfriend would buy. I never agreed to it, but she acted as if I had promised. When we walked into the store that day, her friends were already there, pretending it was a coincidence. They circled around us like an audience waiting for entertainment. Alyssa grabbed the bag from the display and held it to her chest like it was a newborn. She said she deserved it after everything she had sacrificed for our relationship. I reminded her that I had already covered most of our recent expenses. She ignored that and said love meant giving without limits. Her friends chimed in, telling her not to let a cheap guy waste her time. Their voices were loud enough for other shoppers to turn and look. Alyssa stepped closer to me, lowering her voice just enough to make it feel like a threat. She said that if I didn't buy the bag, she would walk out of my life. There was no hesitation, no emotion, just a transactional ultimatum. I told her calmly that if a relationship depended on a price tag, it wasn't a relationship worth saving. Her face changed instantly, as if she had rehearsed the moment. She pulled her hand back dramatically and said we were done. Her friends gasped and whispered loudly, pretending to be shocked. Alyssa stormed out of the store with exaggerated steps, expecting me to chase after her. I didn't. I walked in the opposite direction and headed straight to the parking lot. I sat in my car for a moment, feeling a strange mix of disappointment and relief. The breakup felt sudden, but a part of me knew the relationship had been crumbling long before that moment. I drove home thinking the entire incident was just a final argument that would fade with time. 2 hours later, everything changed. My phone buzzed with a fraud alert from my credit card company. I opened the notification and saw a charge for the exact same store we had just left. It was for the same bag. The timestamp lined up perfectly with the time Alyssa stormed out. My stomach dropped as I realized what she had done. I called the credit card company and reported the charge immediately. They froze the card and told me they would review the security footage. I didn't want to believe Alyssa would go that far, but the evidence was pointing in only one direction. While I was still on the phone, another notification appeared showing an attempted second charge. That was when I knew this wasn't an emotional reaction or a moment of impulse. This was a plan. A calculated move she felt entitled to make because she assumed I would stay quiet. I contacted mall security and filed a report. They promised to pull footage from the store's cameras and involve the police. I ended the call feeling numb and strangely calm. Whatever this was, it was clearly much bigger than a breakup. It was the start of something darker. When mall security called me back, they said the store footage had already confirmed what I feared. Alyssa walked straight to the counter with the bag, presented my emergency credit card, and acted irritated when the cashier asked for ID. She tried to convince them that I was parking the car and that she always used my card. When the cashier hesitated, Alyssa became louder, accusing the store of discrimination and trying to rush the transaction. The moment the authorization failed, she panicked and tried to leave with the bag still in her hand. Security stopped her at the entrance and that was when everything began to unravel. By the time I returned to the mall, 2 police officers were already speaking to her. Alyssa spotted me and immediately started crying, shouting that I had promised the bag and was now humiliating her. She tried to run toward me, but one of the officers blocked her path and asked me to stay where I was. I explained the fraud alert and the prior breakup. The officers asked the store manager to show them the footage. Alyssa paced back and forth, insisting this was all a misunderstanding. When the video clearly showed her using the card without permission, her tone changed from emotional to defensive. She said I owed her, and that couples shared finances automatically. The officers didn't accept that. They asked her again if she had permission to use the card. She couldn't answer without contradicting herself. Moments later, they informed her she was being detained for attempted credit card fraud. Her jaw dropped, as if she never imagined the consequences would reach this point. As they placed cuffs on her wrists, her friends suddenly appeared, phones out, live-streaming the entire scene. They pointed their cameras at me and shouted that I was abusing her financially. They claimed I manipulated her into dependence and then set her up. People nearby started whispering, unsure what was happening. One of the officers stepped in and ordered them to stop interfering. Her friends kept recording, accusing the police of siding with me. Alyssa screamed that I had destroyed her life and that she only took what she deserved. Her friends pushed the narrative even further online, saying I was controlling and withholding money. My phone began buzzing with messages from numbers I didn't recognize. Some were insults. Some demanded explanations. Before I could process any of it, Alyssa's parents called me. They told me I had overreacted, that it was just shopping, and that their daughter was emotional after the breakup. They urged me to drop the report and be a gentleman. When I refused, they insisted she never meant to steal anything. They argued that couples fight, and this was simply a bad moment blown out of proportion. But the footage, the transactions, and the attempted second charge said otherwise. The officers asked me to provide a statement and explained that more investigation would follow. As Alyssa was escorted out of the mall, still crying and still insisting I had ruined everything, I felt strangely detached. What should have been a simple ending to a messy relationship had now become the beginning of a police case. And judging by the reactions of everyone around her, I sensed there was far more beneath the surface than a stolen credit card. The day after Alyssa's arrest, an investigator contacted me with updates that made my stomach twist. They had reviewed my past statements and compared them with my account activity. Multiple small transactions popped up, charges I had brushed off as random glitches or things I might have forgotten. Now they were all confirmed as unauthorized. Over the past several months, Alyssa had been funneling money out of my accounts in increments small enough to avoid suspicion. The total was already in the thousands. I sat there in silence, realizing how long this had been happening without me noticing. The investigator asked if I had ever given her access to my wallet or cards. I admitted she sometimes grabbed my wallet to help organize things, something I never questioned. That was all she needed. A pattern was forming. Later that afternoon, Alyssa showed up at my apartment without warning. She was sobbing hysterically, begging me to fix everything and tell the police it was a misunderstanding. Before I could say no, she dropped to her knees, clutching my leg, promising she would change. When I asked her about the missing money, her expression shifted instantly. The tears dried. Her face hardened. She stood up and started shouting that I was ungrateful and cruel. She said I had ruined her reputation and that I didn't understand how much she needed those things. I closed the door on her while she was still yelling. She pounded on it for several minutes before running off. That night, I received a message from an unfamiliar number. It was her ex-boyfriend, Daniel. He said he had seen her friends, live streams, and knew exactly what I was going through. He told me Alyssa had done the same thing to him, starting with emotional manipulation, escalating into financial dependency, and ending with unauthorized charges. He described the cycle with disturbing accuracy. At first, I didn't want to believe him. Then he offered evidence. Screenshots, statements, messages where Alyssa bragged to her friends about milking him dry. I felt sick reading them. But the worst blow came the next morning when another piece of evidence surfaced. A girl named Tessa, once close friends with Alyssa, messaged me saying she had something I needed to see. She sent a video clip recorded months earlier. In it, Alyssa and her friends were in my living room when I wasn't home. They were laughing while going through my drawers. One of them held up my emergency credit card and joked about saving it for a rainy day. Alyssa told her to take a picture of the numbers just in case. They even practiced excuses to use if they got caught. I felt a wave of anger and disbelief crash over me. Every suspicion, every uneasy feeling I had brushed aside was suddenly validated. This wasn't an impulsive mistake or emotional outburst. It was deliberate. A method. A routine. I brought the video to the investigator, and her face tightened as she watched it. She said this was now part of an expanding case, and that Alyssa's actions might involve more than just me. There were patterns, victims, and behaviors that matched reports from other districts. As I left the station, I realized the truth was much darker than I ever imagined. Alyssa wasn't just reckless or entitled. She had done this before, and she had every intention of doing it again. A few days after turning in the video, the investigator called again, telling me that someone else had come forward. It was Megan, one of Alyssa's closest friends, someone I had seen countless times but never paid attention to. She arrived at the station shaking, carrying a folder thick with printed messages and screenshots. The moment she sat down, she admitted everything. Alyssa wasn't acting alone. She was part of a group they jokingly called the Bag Ladies, a loose network of women who shared strategies on how to target men with stable incomes. They exchanged tips on manipulation, pressure tactics, and ways to gain access to cards without raising red flags. Megan said the group had started years ago as a girls' survival club, but Alyssa turned it into a full-scale operation. She taught new members how to create romantic dependency and then use guilt to extract money. She kept detailed notes on which excuses worked best. Medical emergencies, car repairs, rent issues, emotional breakdowns. Each scenario was practiced and refined like a script. Megan placed her folder on the table and slid it toward the investigator. Inside were message logs, group chats, screenshots of Alyssa bragging about maximizing profits, and even a ranking chart where the group competed over how much they could pull from their partners. Alyssa was always at the top. She referred to me as her biggest score yet. Reading those words felt like a punch to the chest. But the revelations didn't stop there. Megan admitted she had helped Alyssa stage situations to make me look controlling. She confessed they planned the mall scene a week before it happened. They intentionally gathered there so Alyssa would have an audience to pressure me. The goal was simple: push me into buying the bag or use my refusal as justification to steal it later. Another chilling detail emerged when Megan mentioned a podcast appearance Alyssa had recorded just a month earlier. In the episode, Alyssa talked about leveraging men for financial stability and hinted she had perfected a system that other women should follow. She disguised it as empowerment, but it was a confession hidden in plain sight. The investigator pulled up the episode, and even through the casual tone, Alyssa's words revealed clear intent. She joked about harmless fraud and said men rarely notice the small things missing. She described manipulating sympathy and using social pressure to mask theft. Megan continued talking, and every sentence made Alyssa's actions look less like impulsive mistakes and more like organized exploitation. She even mentioned that Alyssa tracked her victims in a spreadsheet. Names, income estimates, psychological vulnerabilities, preferred manipulation methods. Hearing it felt surreal, like I had stumbled into some underground con ring instead of a breakup gone wrong. The investigator assured me that with this level of evidence, the case was expanding. Not only would Alyssa face charges, but several other members of the group would soon be questioned. As I left the station, I felt a strange mixture of dread and relief. Dread because I now understood the scale of Alyssa's deception. Relief because the truth was finally coming to light. For the first time since everything began, the situation felt bigger than my own pain. This wasn't just about me anymore. It was about stopping something that had gone on far too long. Alyssa's public meltdown began the moment news of the investigation spread online. Instead of laying low, she opened her phone and went live on every platform she could access. She cried, screamed, and insisted she was the true victim. She claimed I had manipulated her emotionally for months and that the credit card incident was a desperate attempt to survive the breakup. Her followers split immediately. Some defended her, but most questioned her shifting stories. The more she talked, the more contradictory her statements became. She blamed stress, trauma, society, and even the store employees, saying they misinterpreted her confidence as aggression. Every livestream brought new excuses. Every TikTok added more inconsistencies. By the end of the week, she had unintentionally dug herself into a deeper hole. Her videos were reposted by commentary channels and dissected line by line. Lawyers on social media mocked her bizarre legal explanations. People noticed how many details she changed each time she spoke. Her parents stepped in next, calling me repeatedly and insisting they could fix all of this quietly. They suggested private settlements. They offered money. They tried guilt. They tried intimidation. When none of it worked, they turned defensive and accused me of trying to destroy their family. The investigator warned me to document everything, including their calls, in case the pressure escalated further. Meanwhile, Alyssa's attorney filed several emergency motions attempting to soften the charges. But after reviewing the evidence, screenshots, videos, witness statements, he withdrew from the case entirely. He left a formal note saying that his client refused to follow legal advice and was jeopardizing her own defense. Alyssa responded by announcing she would represent herself. She claimed she didn't need a lawyer because she had studied enough legal content on the internet. During pretrial hearings, she made arguments that left the courtroom stunned. She insisted that any relationship established through emotional intimacy automatically created shared finances. She claimed she couldn't be charged for using what already belonged to her spiritually. When the judge denied her motions, she accused the court of gender bias. The investigator told me privately that her behavior was making the prosecution's job easier. Then, just days before the official court date, Alyssa attempted to flee across the Canadian border. Her car was flagged by border agents after her license plate matched an alert tied to a pending fraud case. She had packed bags, cash, and a handwritten list of places she could hide. She was brought back in handcuffs, screaming that she was being persecuted for love. News of her capture spread fast, and suddenly her live streams disappeared. Her parents tried to spin the situation by claiming she was taking a mental health break, but no one bought it. The prosecutor added her attempted escape to the case file. Her court appearance now included an additional charge for evading legal proceedings. When I received the update, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt tired. Tired of the chaos, the lies, the manipulation, and the storm she created around everyone connected to her. The upcoming trial loomed over all of us, and the evidence pile had grown so large that the outcome seemed inevitable. Yet a part of me still braced for impact, knowing Alyssa would make the courtroom her final stage. The courtroom was silent when Alyssa was finally brought in. Her attempt to flee had drained whatever confidence she once displayed, yet she still carried herself with a strange mix of defiance and desperation. She insisted on speaking for herself, arguing that no attorney could capture the emotional nuance of her situation. When the judge asked whether she understood the charges, she launched into a long speech about spiritual contracts and the unfair expectations placed on women in modern relationships. Her words drifted in circles, never addressing anything concrete. The judge interrupted twice, just to steer her back to basic procedure. The prosecution presented evidence methodically. They played the mall footage, showed the credit card transaction attempts, and displayed the screenshots Megan had provided. Each piece stacked on top of the next, forming a clear pattern that was impossible to dismiss. I sat quietly, listening, feeling strangely detached from the entire process. It was as if the events had happened to someone else. Alyssa objected constantly, but her objections were incoherent. She accused the investigator of bias against emotionally expressive women. She accused me of weaponizing stability. She even accused her own former friends of jealousy, calling them failed apprentices. At one point, she asked the court to dismiss all evidence that was collected without her emotional consent, a phrase that made the prosecutor raise an eyebrow in disbelief. The judge denied the request immediately. As the testimonies continued, Alyssa grew increasingly agitated. She paced. She muttered. She scribbled notes furiously, only to tear them up moments later. When Megan took the stand and recounted their group activities, Alyssa shouted that she was lying out of envy. The judge warned her that one more outburst would result in removal from the courtroom. Alyssa quieted down, but her expression simmered with panic. Then came the part I feared most, when I was called to speak. My voice felt distant, but steady. I recounted everything: the bag, the card, the escalating manipulation, the pressure, the final confrontation. I didn't embellish or dramatize. I just told the truth. Alyssa refused to cross-examine me directly. Instead, she delivered another speech claiming our entire relationship was a misunderstanding between two souls evolving at different speeds. The courtroom stared in stunned silence. By the time closing arguments arrived, the trial felt less like a legal proceeding and more like the unraveling of someone who had believed for too long that consequences were optional. The prosecutor summarized everything concisely, emphasizing the premeditation, the coordinated tactics, and the attempt to flee. Alyssa countered with a rambling monologue about cosmic injustice and the overreach of institutional morality. The judge delivered the verdict the next morning. Guilty on all primary charges, including attempted fraud, theft, and evasion. Her sentencing hearing was scheduled for the following month. Alyssa stood stiff and silent as the words were read, but a single tear slid down her cheek. Whether from fear, frustration, or shock, no one could tell. As I walked out of the courthouse, I felt neither joy nor revenge. Only a deep, exhausted exhale. The storm that had consumed so many months of my life was finally calming. The truth had been spoken, heard, and recognized. And now, at last, the rebuilding could begin. When I finally stepped out of the police station, the air felt different. It wasn't lighter, but it was clearer, like the noise around me had finally settled. Alyssa was officially charged, and the officers told me the investigation would continue for weeks. I knew the process wasn't over, but for the first time, I felt like I wasn't fighting alone. Her friends who once mocked me had already wiped their social media of every trace of her. Some even sent half-hearted apologies, though none of them mattered anymore. What mattered was that the truth was finally bigger than her lies. I walked to my car with a strange mix of exhaustion and relief running through my chest. I wasn't proud of everything that had happened, but I was proud I didn't let her destroy me. The mess she created would take time to clean up, but at least it wasn't growing anymore. And as I drove home, I realized that surviving someone like her wasn't just an ending. It was the beginning of finally getting my life back.